What's up, everybody? Come to me. It's Justin. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Live Ask Me Anything, number 76 on a Thursday. Whoa, so weird, right? These are usually on Wednesdays, push things back just one day, no big deal. I'm going to make sure everything's working properly, right? What's up? Judy's here. Awesome. Judy's the first one here. Love it. Kayla, Jackie, what's up? I just did a Instagram post, which is why I'm a couple minutes late, trying to get some Instagram peeps to come over here with my fancy new case and everything. Got the people on the grams. Look, I've never looked at my own Instagram on Facebook Live before. 2 Justins. Also, why do I have AirPods in? I don't need these. That's silly. Okay, what's up, everybody? How you doing? Hey, you didn't miss it. Nope, Judy, your streak continues. You got this thing. Awesome. How does it sound? Let me know how it sounds, because I recorded a podcast today, an amazing podcast that you guys are going to love, with Tina Anderson, the founder of Just Thrive Probiotics. And we had a fantastic conversation about gut health and about childhood gut health, which was awesome. And we talked about prebiotics and vitamin K2. And we talked about the cutting edge research and actual clinical data on gut health. It was amazing. So what's up? What's up? Who else is here? Kayla, thank you for tagging your friend. That is awesome. Oh, you tagged a bunch of friends. Killer. Awesome. Aloha. Keep doing that. Tag friends. That's awesome. Click the like button, click the happy button, click the sad face button. I mean, don't click the sad face button. That's kind of weird, but you can if you want to. I don't know. I don't know how you're feeling. I'm not in charge of how you're feeling, right? But I want to make you happy by the end of this episode. So what I had you do was submit your questions at ama.iamclovis.com. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. Let's see here. Check 1, 2. I wasn't recording the podcast, everybody. That's a bummer. Let me start recording the podcast real quick. The joys of live. And since I do these like sit down AMA episodes, like genuine AMAs where I'm just answering questions versus like the big whiteboard presentations, 2 different things, 2 different setups. So it's like I have 2 different checklists for when I do these different kind of things. Okay, let's see. Hello, check 1, 2. Yes. Okay, podcast now recording in GarageBand. What's up? Mike's in here. Carla's in here. How's it going? I'm doing well, man. Thank you. Jackie, Catherine, Laura, Brett. Who else did I miss? Anybody? I think I named all the names that are in here. Awesome. What's up? 18 people on a Thursday. This is crazy. Awesome. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for putting up with my moving of the things. The Paleo Valley crew has been at my house for the last 2 days. Pretty cool stuff. We were having some family time, some entrepreneur family time. So I showed them around Nashville. And since I didn't have a big presentation or anything like that set up, I was like, you know what? We're going to do Thursday. Okay, cool. Life happens. Awesome. That's the whole point of having your own company, isn't it? Oh, I can't wait for that podcast. Yeah, it's going to be great. And Kayla, you're correct. Jackie, your podcast was awesome. If you guys haven't heard Jackie's podcast, you can go to clovis.show/Jackie, Jackie, clovis.show/Jackie. That's one of my client testimony podcasts. And I have a bunch of those already recorded too that I'm going to keep putting out. But I just kind of want to put a couple weeks in between them or do interviews in between them. Like I did Hillary Boynton, the Lunch Ladies episode. Check her out at clovis.show/lunchlady. That's a fantastic episode. Let's dig into this one, everybody. So this is AMA number 76. And I got great questions from you. As you guys know, at any point in time here, I'll share the URL. You can go to ama.iamclovis.com. So anybody listening to this in the back end is a podcast as well. You can go to ama.iamclovis.com. You can ask me questions at any given time, and they just funnel into an Evernote folder that I have all set up and automated. So I go in and look at these AMA questions, and I have questions that I can use for the episode in case people are feeling quiet. People get into the live room here and they get a little shy sometimes. So I just make sure that we have some questions lined up that you guys want to answer. I'm sorry. Cool. Kayla, keep tagging people. I love it. Awesome. All right, so let's dig in here. What do we have today? So I'm going to just rattle off. I'm going to look at a couple of these questions here. We have a question about blood types. We have a question about uric acid and gout. Interesting stuff. We have a question about diarrhea. After fasting in particular, which is an interesting question that I really want to dig into. What else do I have? I put a bunch of them up here and I'll just see how many I can get through. That's kind of how we're going to do this. Another question about childhood, right? So I do a lot of these memes on Instagram that get a lot of attention, like dad's plate versus kid's plate. And I had another one that was effing goldfish, but I used the F word. Uh-oh, I've never done that before. Weird, right? But yeah, so these memes I make about childhood nutrition get really dicey, and it's really fun to watch because a lot of people haven't done a lot of work on the ego. So I get to just kind of watch parents implode and just get like uber defensive. And I'm like, ooh, if you're that upset and feel the need to comment in this way on this post, then you're probably not liking the way that you're feeding your kid and you're projecting this now. It's kind of crazy to watch. But anyway, we're going to talk about childhood nutrition. What else did I have? I had somebody asking about hydroponic gardening. So maybe we'll talk about that. So let's dig in. We'll start at the top here. I want to start with the hurricane stock item suggestions. That's a good one. Okay. So hurricane stock item suggestions, everything goes out the window. I mean, really, anytime you're dealing like an Armageddon situation, this is actually an interesting story because I've done a lot of military style training. Like I've trained with militias and I've trained with like, ex-military guys and law enforcement. And I have a ton of firearms training under my belt, and I have like survival training and all this crazy stuff that it's combined with my martial arts and blah, blah, blah. So I've just been in that world and explored a lot of things. And it's just, you're simply just looking at a nutrient density. I mean, you're not gonna worry at all about like Clovis foods, right? So let's just hit this one real quick. Like you're gonna want like nuts and nut butters, and basically canned meats would not be a bad option depending on when the expiration date is, particularly for something like a hurricane. So if you're talking about like an Armageddon type thing, all bets are off. It's like you're gonna want canned foods that last on the shelf forever just so you survive. But if you're talking about like hurricane stock items where like you might have a couple of days of trouble on your hands. At worst, you'd have like some catastrophic event where it's like weeks on hands. Think about it. You just want the most amount of nutrients in the smallest amount of space that don't require refrigeration, right? So like how many calories are in a can of tennis balls? Like if you fill that thing with macadamia nuts, or just like stockpile macadamia nuts and like nut butter, like cashew butter, almond butters, even peanut butter, whatever. You're just thinking about caloric density in the smallest amount of space. Does that make sense? That's like the easiest way to think about it, is like what type of, not even necessarily nutrient density, just food intake, like what caloric load can you fit in the smallest amount of space that doesn't require refrigeration? That's probably the easiest way to look at it. Or you just buy 10,000 bags of Perfect Paleo Powder. And if you want to buy 10,000 bags of Perfect Paleo Powder, I'll totally give you a giant discount for buying in bulk, but you just got to buy 10,000. Okay, deal? Sound good? Awesome. You're all set for your hurricane killer. All right, let's dive into this. Is there any truth behind eating for your blood type? That's the question. Is there any truth behind eating for your blood type? So the short answer to this question is a big fat no. Like not even a little bit. No. And I don't actually know why I said the short answer, because the long answer is also a big fat no. It's just no across the board, everybody. This is nonsense, complete nonsense. There's zero evidence to back this up whatsoever. I mean, you could scour the internet and try to find evidence to back it up, but you're going to fall short, I promise you. So the big thing with the blood type diet is it really comes from one source, really. It's this guy, Dr. D'Adamo, I think his name is D'Adamo. But I can't remember. I may have touched on this at some point. I think I may have like had a question about it and just kind of dismissed it and was like, no, that's not a real thing. Like that's silly. It's crazy, right? Blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it. Don't eat for your blood type. Really, you don't have to eat for your blood type. Like the only time your blood type even matters to you really is if you need a transfusion or something like that. This doctor is on par for me with like the medical medium. Really makes me want to put my head through a wall. Like I can't understand how these people are selling books and selling plans and becoming bestsellers and making a whole lot of money on these nonsense claims that are just completely unfounded, no evidence behind them. This guy, he's literally just like the medical medium to me. He's just spewing nonsense. And the thing is, the guy disqualifies himself right from the jump, like straight up disqualifies himself. So let's talk about this whole thing, right? So the blood type hypothesis, I guess we would talk about it, like the eat for your blood type or whatever he says. He's claiming that there's one original blood type. He claims that the original blood type is type O, which he gets wrong, by the way. And then he claims that these new blood types popped up, like type A, type B, or whatever, based on the foods we were eating. So part of our evolution as humans and changes in our blood types are because of the foods that we were eating. Now, then he goes on to talk about lectins. The guy's pretty big on lectins, right? And as you know, I'm huge on lectins and avoiding them, okay? So I've told you guys a million times how lectins work. Lectins cause leaky gut. Lectins are proteins. They resemble proteins in the body. Your body triggers an autoimmune response, attacks itself because it can't tell the difference between the lectins and proteins that belong to the body. So healthy tissue versus problematic tissue, right? Now, this guy's claiming that the different molecular structures of different lectins may more closely resemble specific types of blood types, basically. So like if you have a specific blood type, certain lectin molecules might look more like your tissue than someone's tissue with a different blood type. So if you follow me here, he's just saying some lectins are more harmful for people based on their blood type or less harmful for people based on their blood types, okay? So this is what he's saying. He makes it just complicated enough. This is basically this is how you sell books, everybody, right? Is he makes it just complicated enough to kind of sound logical, and he makes it virtually impossible for like average Joes to question him. He's just like, no, this is my hypothesis and X, Y, Z, and here's why, and blah, blah, blah. So he sells a bunch of books, right? But the thing is, he disqualifies himself from the jump because his claim is that there was one original blood type, and that original blood type was type O, right? The problem is that molecular biologists had already determined, literally like easy 5 years before this guy's book came out, determined that the original human blood type was type A, okay? So 5 years after that research is released, this guy comes out with a book and claims that it's type O. Like, clearly he's a fan of cutting edge, solid research, right? Like, no, he disqualifies himself from the jump. And the diet's it's just complete nonsense. So I'll give you guys an example. Like, I was talking to a Clovis client recently about alcohol. And the question she asked me was, hey, like if I experiment with carnivore, how does alcohol affect somebody on a carnivore diet? And I was like, whoa. Let's take a step back, right? There's biochemistry and human metabolism, right? Biochemistry and human metabolism don't change based on the diet that you're on. I mean, fundamentally, right? You might have more insulin in the system or have unbalanced hormones or all these things. Things can change within the body, right? But biochemistry is still biochemistry. Human metabolism is still human metabolism. So what I said to her is like, the way your body handles alcohol is simply the way your body handles alcohol. That's a biochemical response to something that you're ingesting, right? So it doesn't matter if you're carnivore or vegan or vegetarian or Clovis. It's like if you drink alcohol, the body has to process alcohol as alcohol. That process doesn't change based on your diet. It also doesn't change based on your blood type, okay? So, I mean, we could totally just save kids, I'll say kids, like high school kids, we could save them at least thousands of dollars, if not between all of them, you save them millions of dollars. If all we really did was just teach them biochemistry and immunology at like a basic level, you can see through this nonsense. So what's happening here is if you have a blood type diet, let's say you have a friend or something that did this blood type diet and they're like, oh my God, I did this blood type diet and I've never felt better in my life. Like within 2 weeks, I had amazing results. By day 30, I felt better than I'd ever felt. This is incredible. You need to try this, right? These anecdotal things happen all the time. Let me put my phone in do not disturb. Yeah. So these kind of things happen all the time. These anecdotal things of like, yes, I tried this blood type diet and I feel absolutely amazing. This is incredible. You need to try it. So how does that happen, right? Because I can say something like the blood type diet is complete nonsense and write it off. And then there's going to be people that are like, the blood type diet changed my life. You don't understand. Here's why, everybody. And this is where we look at the medical medium as well and like just take a 30,000 foot view and look at the common sense of this and see how this guy just took common sense, turned it into his own thing, spun it for a profit, right? So basically what happens is in this guy's blood type recommendation, he tells people that are blood types O, A, and B to not eat any wheat, to begin a wheat-free diet, to adopt a wheat-free diet forever, right? Literally, if you're a blood type O, blood type A, or blood type B, you need to go on a wheat-free diet 100%, right? So people do this and they feel amazing. Well, guess what, everybody? Those three blood types account for 96% of the population. So if you read the guy's book and you are part of the 96% of the population with those three blood types, you're going to go on a wheat-free diet and your health is going to improve. And you're going to think that it has something to do with your blood type. And that is nonsense. Okay? So that is how the blood type diet works, everybody. The guy was clever. I think he's a super dishonest person. I think like he's a genuinely dishonest dude that you don't want to buy stuff from. He's just taking data and manipulating it to literally invent a diet out of thin air and get money from people. So yeah, he tells 96% of all people to go on a wheat-free diet. What is this a secret? Is this a secret, everybody? It's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely crazy. What do we got here? I can't drink anymore. One drink and I'm gone to lunch. Yeah, Nicole, my body cannot handle certain alcoholic drinks I used to drink. Love craft beers. My body doesn't anymore. Exactly. Why? Because you're used to poisoning yourself. It literally works just like vaccines. It's like you just were used to poisoning yourself with beer. I used to drink beer all the time. Like my favorite foods were straight up pizza and craft beer. That's it. Like love them. I won't touch either of them. It's not worth the mouth pleasure, the 15 seconds of mouth pleasure I get on my tongue. It's like to just feel like I'm dying for the next 3 days. But the thing is, it's the same way like this happens with kids, everybody. Like as schools say, like we have a nut-free school, nobody can bring in any nuts at all because of peanut allergies. More kids become allergic to peanuts. Why? Because they're basically not immunized against peanuts because they're not exposed to them. Right? So the number of peanut allergies is going through the roof as these schools adopt things like having no peanuts anywhere. Like God forbid a kid breathe in peanut dust from across the room, right? Now there are kids that like can actually go into shock and like die from that. So it is a very serious thing. I'm not trying to make light of it, but this is what happens. It's just your immune system, right? So it's like you used to drink beer on a more regular basis and it probably made you feel crappy at first too, but you didn't really know because you were also eating pasta and also eating bread and also eating sugar and maybe drinking energy drinks. Like I used to drink Fireball and Red Bull. I used to do shots of Jägermeister and chase it with a Miller Lite. You know, so I don't know what was messing me up or what wasn't. I didn't know when I felt good, didn't know when I felt crappy. It's only when you get all the shit out of your system, which Nicole, I know where you're at as a Clovis client, right? I know where you're at. You got all the shit out of your system. Try to introduce it back in. Good luck. Your body will scream at you and be like, we don't like this. This is awful, right? So you just have to learn that lesson. What drives me nuts is some people will do something like Clovis or paleo or whatever, and they get like super healthy and they're like, yeah, man, I just went back to my old way of eating because like, it just made me weaker, man. Like, I just didn't like it. Like I'd drink beer and like get diarrhea. So I just went back to eating that stuff because I don't want to have to like give it up forever. I'm like, what? Oh my God, natural selection is real. Your gene pool's going to go away, bro. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. But anyway, moving on before I get myself in trouble here. Okay, so the next question I have is, this is the question. I'm just going to read it to you. I'm a noob, but wondered if you have talked about lowering uric acid and prevention of gout. How does Clovis affect gout? So I got a lot of thoughts on this. And I'm going to start by saying that Clovis will prevent gout and improve gout if you have it. Now, let me follow it up by saying I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on the internet, right? No, I'm not a doctor. Don't trust me for medical advice. This is not medical advice, right? But the thing is, this is one of those situations where one of my primary goals with Clovis is to lower the inflammation in your body, right? So lowering inflammation puts you at a decreased risk of literally all illness, right? Absolutely. Tina and I talked about that today with gut health and the Just Thrive podcast. So I think this is another scenario where the medical community just has it completely wrong. Like they're just looking at these things that they can't get out of their minds. They're myopically focused on purines and uric acid, right? So they're looking at animal products, basically. So I'll teach you guys how this stuff works. But basically, it's like they're blaming uric acid, which is a byproduct of purine. So purine is like super potent in these animal products. Like it's in liver, it's in red meat, it's even in like sardines and mussels and seafood. So it becomes this thing where like, oh, uric acid is a byproduct of purine, and there's purine in animal products, and therefore animal products and protein cause gout, right? Which is not true at all. We have this issue of correlation versus causation again, right? So this is the same way I feel about cardiovascular risk and cardiovascular disease, right? So one of my favorite analogies from Dr. Nadir, I can't remember his last name, but he uses the firefighter analogy for heart attacks, right? He says, if you look at any house fire, like if there were 10 house fires in your neighborhood and you looked at every house fire, there would be firefighters at every single house fire. Does that mean that firefighters cause house fires? No, that's not logical, right? But you can make the argument, well, a firefighter was there at the scene of the crime at every single fire. Therefore, there's a correlation between firefighters and house fires, right? It's one of my favorite analogies, and he's talking about cholesterol, right? Cholesterol is at the scene of the crime for cardiovascular events. That doesn't mean it caused the cardiovascular event. So if we were to talk about uric acid, right, we talk about gout, these painful bouts of gout, these flare-ups, right? Uric acid, right? So uric acid is there at the scene of the crime, but the common denominator for cardiovascular disease and gout is inflammation, right? Without inflammation, you could literally have like off the charts, the highest levels of uric acid. You could have the highest cholesterol, the highest LDLP number, whatever, and you're at zero risk for cardiovascular disease or gout, right? These are inflammatory conditions. Inflammation is necessary, right? Without inflammation, it can't happen. It's part of the equation that is so important that without it, it can't happen. So when we talk about these purines, that the byproduct, the metabolization of these purines is uric acid, right? So you're looking at these animal products. Well, what do these animal products have in them that reduce inflammation in the body? Most of them are very high in omega-3s. If we're talking about grass-fed meats, right, from cattle, if we're talking about sardines, wild-caught fish, talking about mussels, all these things that have beautiful omega-3s, right, which are reducing inflammation in the body. Why? Because holistically, Mother Nature is brilliant and knows what she's doing with foods found in nature, okay? Now, if we were to talk about smoking guns, like really try to find an actual correlation, which could, lead to a study and prove causation. But again, now I'm going on correlation, which I don't like to do anyway. But one of these things that seems to be heavily correlated with gout is fructose consumption, namely in liquids like high fructose corn syrup, right? Fructose seems to be pretty directly correlated with gout because excess fructose does two things in the body. It actually does increase the amount of uric acid in the body, but it also decreases the amount of uric acid that the body can excrete, right? This is literally like a perfect 1-2 combo punch for a buildup of uric acid in the system. And uric acid can also play a role along with fructose. We know fructose does this. This is why I freak out about fructose, because fructose is directly implicated in insulin resistance. And it looks like uric acid could also play a role in insulin resistance, therefore metabolic syndrome, therefore type 2 diabetes, right? So what you really want to look out for if you're dealing with gout is sugar sweetened liquids, refined processed carbohydrates, vegetable oils seem to be pretty nasty. Alcohol, like we just talked about, beer is a terrible one, right? But these things all top the list of risk of gout way above and beyond anything like a red meat or liver or fish or anything like that, right? So I'll give you guys an example. Like you can't have this issue without inflammation. I eat 35% of my daily calories, and I've done this for a long time. I've played with fat and carbohydrate ratios, but my protein ratio in terms of macronutrients has stayed the same for like probably 2.5 years now. Right around like 35% of my daily calories are coming from protein directly from red meat, like ribeyes, grass-fed ground beef, liver. So I mean, I'm taking in 35% of my daily calories, which would be considered in America a high protein diet, right? Directly from these animal products. And I test my blood every 3 months, and my inflammation levels, like C-reactive protein, homocysteine, all these markers for inflammation, are almost untraceable. Like literally, you almost can't measure them in my system. I have zero inflammation in my body. So I'm not at risk of these things. Like how can I eat such a high protein diet and not be at risk of gout? Or I've never had a gout issue in my life, right? So does that mean protein and animal products like cause gout? I don't know. I mean, this is just my N=1, but it certainly doesn't seem to be a problem in my situation. So lower inflammation and don't worry about it, All right. 8:30. We got some time left. Let me check. Oh, cool. I'm going to check my fancy watch. Check this out. This is for my friends. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. This is my new watch. That looks terrible on camera. Let me see. Let's do it this way. This is my Filippo Loretti watch. It's awesome. For my friends Mattis and Danielis. I met these guys out in Europe. They're amazing. And they make super killer watches and were badasses and broke a bunch of world records on Kickstarter and stuff. They're awesome. But yeah, Filippo Loretti watches. Check these things out. They're badass, super comfortable. The strap is awesome, the way it straps on. Anyway, shouting out my friends, everybody. I'm super excited about it. This thing is great. So anyway, check them out. Filippo Loretti. All right, let's see what we got. Why do your first couple of meals go straight through you after a fast? Haha. I always have to plan my day accordingly. Makes sense. Okay, I get it. So this is super common, actually. Super common, particularly for for a particular type of person. So you might love to hear this, you might hate to hear this. Like this, if you're new to Clovis and you were a standard fruit eating sugar burner, as we call them, like if you were just like loaded up on carbohydrates and we're eating a standard American diet and you come into Clovis, even if you're like months into Clovis and you're like, I'm going to try my first prolonged or extended fast, then when you break that fast, you're probably going to head to the bathroom. And it's not a bad thing. And we can explain exactly why that happens. I mean, number one being, first and foremost, I want you guys to pick up the Perfect Fasting Protocol. If you are a member of Clovis and don't have the Perfect Fasting Protocol, it's just silly. Like, I know I have AMA, I think it's AMA number 25, which is Fasting Facts from Fat Loss to Longevity. But the Perfect Fasting Protocol is fantastic. And yes, okay, I'm pitching it to you here, whatever. I believe in the book. I think it's one of the best ebooks I've ever seen on fasting. I break it down in a super simple way. It's not too long to get through. I outline all the different types of fast, prolonged fast, extended fast, intermittent fast, bone broth fast, fat fast, all these different things. And I actually give you a little mini class on insulin and blood glucose. So I talk a lot about electrolytes in terms of a low carbohydrate diet, because what happens is when your insulin levels suddenly drop, like when your insulin levels plummet, that's just a signal to the kidneys to release excess water, right? So it can actually dehydrate you. And as we know, what's really in charge of your hydration is not so much water as it is sodium, right? Sodium is a big deal. But when you have this insulin plummet and you have this kidney water dump, this can actually lead to very loose stool. Like, this can lead to like serious diarrhea, right? Now, the other thing to remember is when you're on a fast, a lot of you come to me and your digestive system hasn't had a break for more than like 10 hours, maybe 8 to 10 hours in like decades, because everybody bought into the snack every few hours and don't let your blood sugar drop and eat small meals 5 times a day and all this crazy stuff that we all bought into, that I used to do too. I used to carry Tupperware with me and eat 5 times a day when I was bodybuilding, right? So we've all fallen into that trap. So you've gone decades without giving your digestive system any kind of break. So what happens? When we talk about, I always get annoyed when people talk about cleanses or juice cleanses or detox or anything like that, right? Because the best detox you can possibly do is just a prolonged water fast, because you're not just getting rid of excess body fat. You will switch into fat burning mode, but what else is happening? I've talked to you guys about this before. When people say the keto flu, I hate the keto flu because Clovis is not keto, but that's the only term I can use. People know what I'm talking about, right? So when you're dealing with something like the keto flu, I've talked about the kidneys excreting excess water, therefore you need more electrolytes. Yes, that's part of it. But what have I also talked about is that toxins are fat soluble. The body protects the bloodstream from toxins by storing them in fat cells. So when you go into this fasted mode where your insulin plummets, your blood glucose plummets, now you're in a fasted state, you're burning fat for fuel, you're breaking up triglycerides. So when you're breaking up triglycerides and burning fat for fuel, you will actually get a release of toxins that were stored in fat cells directly into your bloodstream. Okay. So all of a sudden, these toxins release into the bloodstream and your body needs to figure out what the hell to do with them. And it might not have a great antioxidant capacity because you haven't been healthy for decades. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, your body's just getting swamped with these toxins that have been stored in your body for decades. And it's like, oh no, we have all these toxins. What do we do? So some people will experience diarrhea during the fasting, like they're going to the bathroom multiple days during the fast and trying to figure out what's going on. That's why I often recommend that people still continue to consume electrolytes and drink a lot of water while they fast. Some people will do black coffee, which, as we know, black coffee itself can also act as a diuretic. So all of a sudden, like, you're just flushing a lot of stuff while you're fasting. Now, the other thing is, when this process is going on, you've finally given the body a chance to be like, hey, we can take a break from digestion and we can start doing things like autophagy and apoptosis. Now, you'll learn about this in the Perfect Fasting Protocol. It's in my AMA about fasting. But autophagy and apoptosis is basically cellular repair and cellular destruction, like the programmed cell death, right? So your body literally metabolizes its own tissue by breaking up these cells and metabolizing them. So now you have things like autophagy and apoptosis happening. So, I mean, you're basically clearing out your entire body on a cellular level. And the body says, oh, we don't have to focus on digestion. Let's do this crazy clean out, right? Then all of a sudden, particularly if you don't ease back into the refeeding, let's say you do a 48-hour fast, 72-hour fast, 96-hour fast, or whatever, and you have your first big meal, the body's going to go, oh boy, it's time to digest food again. Let's turn off all that other stuff. Let's forget about fat burning right now. Let's forget about apoptosis, forget about autophagy. We just got a bunch of fat, protein, and carbs we have to deal with. Now we have fat, protein, and carbs coming into the system, and we have this full system which excretes things, right? So we know that new things are coming in, and now we have all this buildup of stuff that we've released into the system, into the bloodstream while we were burning and cleansing and everything, right? So it goes, oh, we got to focus on digestion. We got to make room for this stuff, literally. And all of a sudden it takes all of that cleansing that you did through your fasting and just goes, see ya, right? I mean, there are stories of people that literally like have to wash their clothes after like breaking their fast on a fast. So you do have to be very careful about it, right? But this actually gets better. The more that you practice fasting and the longer you follow something like a Clovis protocol and you actually just get yourself healthier. Like I don't really have a huge issue with this. If I do an extended fast, I've done, a 4-day fast and gone straight to like eating a ribeye and been just fine, but really the newer you are to Clovis, the newer you are to clean eating and eating whole foods, the newer you are to fasting, and the unhealthier you've been in your life in the past decades, you're probably going to do some significant flushing. See what I did there? That was a pun. Significant, literal flushing. So that's my take on fasting and why you have to go duty sometimes after you fast, right? Everybody got that understanding? That makes sense? Missed the first part of this because I got lost hiking barefoot in the wilderness, getting some evening sun, but here now. That is awesome. That's a great reason to be late. These live on forever in infamy in the podcast, and I say things that get me in trouble and people laugh at me, and then they're on the internet forever, which also we made an awesome playlist of the red meat myths from last week. It's on its own playlist. YouTube is getting awesome. You guys got to check out youtube.com/theclovisculture. Jeff. So when not fasting, how many meals do you do a day, 24-hour period? Don't worry about me. I keep saying this to people. You guys don't worry about what Justin does. So like if you're asking me, oh, it's Artina. What's up, Artina? If you're asking me directly what I do, don't worry about me. You're not me, right? You don't train the way that I do. You don't sleep the way that I do. You don't work the way that I do. Your body composition is not the way that my body composition is. I was explaining this actually to my friends, Matt and Kayla from Paleo Valley, because they were asking me about morning routines and what does my food intake look like. And I am the most boring person in the world. I am the most boring person in the world. I eat 2 meals a day and they are the same exact thing, literally just twice in one day. One of them has 4 ounces of liver added to it because I eat 4 ounces of liver every day. It's literally the same thing. And it's just, I don't even want to tell you like exactly what I eat because I don't want you to go eat exactly what I eat because your caloric intake, your macros, all that are not what mine is. So that's the thing. I get it. Like people ask me what I do because I'm a healthy guy and I totally understand that. But I don't want you to go do what I do. Like the majority of my diet is like ribeye steak and grass-fed beef and MCT oil. And I do still do grass-fed butter. And when I'm not experimenting with carnivore, because I'm also doing this carnivore experiment right now, trying to put on muscle with the carnivore diet. So there are things in my diet that would not normally be there, like cold filtration whey protein is part of my diet right now. And yeah, just things that I wouldn't necessarily want you to mess with. But for me, generally speaking, I eat 2 meals a day. It's just easier for me to do 2 meals a day because breakfast is usually skipped. And then I'll do like one really big meal at like noon and one really big meal at like 5:30. I'm usually done eating by 6 p.m. And yeah, that's about it. Then I just kind of fast the rest of the time. So I'm super boring. I was talking to Matt and Kayla about that too. They're like, dude, I just need variety. I was like, yeah, I know a lot of people need variety. I don't need variety. I don't know why. It's weird. I'm just different. My mom says that too. My mom's like, if I were like you eating the same thing every day, like I would start to gag. Like I would gag on these foods. I just need variety. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I don't. It's weird. All right. So what else we got here? Yeah, I wanted to get into this one. Oh, just wondering if several small meals no, several small meals. I do not like that idea at all. So if that's the question, that's a much better question. I wholeheartedly believe that the fasted state is super important. Like, so people ask this question about ketosis, right? People freak out about ketosis. I'm going to get kicked out of ketosis. I'm going to get kicked out of ketosis. So what? Like you're literally designed to move. If you're metabolically flexible, you're designed to move in and out of ketosis within a period of hours every single day, multiple times a day, right? So if you're in a fasted state, you should be in ketosis. If you're in a fed state, you're not going to be in ketosis because your insulin is high, your glucose is high, all these things. You're not going to be in ketosis at that point, right? And that's okay. We're designed to come in and out of ketosis. When people think about things in like a 24-hour period, it's just like, no, it's feast and famine, really. It's like just eat a big meal until you're completely full and then fast for a while. Like my 2 meals have multiple hours between them. And then I personally, again, just me, I'm also a male, take that into consideration, Artina, because intermittent fasting is much different for males and females. So yeah, I tend to do at least a 16-hour intermittent fast every day, unless, okay, so again, details matter, unless I'm doing something like this crazy mass gains thing, where within about 12 hours of being fasted, I will whip up a coffee with some protein and some healthy fats. Just because I don't want to stay in a fasted state for too long because I'm trying to stay in an anabolic state, which is totally different. So I think I probably just confused you more than gave you excellent advice. I'm sorry. My personal diet is quite strange. It's much different than most people's. All right, so let's dig into the kiddos and their diets, okay? I love this question. I love this question because the answer is kind of harsh, and I'll try to make the answer not harsh. But here's the question. How do we know our children are getting the proper macros? I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. And the answer to this is you don't. You straight up don't. And you will not unless you come to me. And I understand that sounds pompous or that sounds arrogant or whatever, but I'm telling you, I talked about this when I was on the Optimized Paleo podcast. So if you guys didn't see that, I was on the Optimized Paleo podcast with Autumn Smith from Paleo Valley, and she talked to me all about my program called Clovis Kids. So I started this program called Clovis Kids because I realized that if you were to walk down the street and ask 100 parents the daily nutrient and caloric intake needs and macronutrient needs of their child, 100 of them would not know. Literally that bad. If you were to walk down the street and ask 100 parents, I'm virtually certain that 100 of them would not know the correct answer to that question. I'm saying all of them. It's really that bad. But why? Because if you try to research this, you're going to find zero details, no nuance whatsoever. So if you're looking at like the conventional medical community, which is where all parents get their advice on children from, which drives me fucking crazy, is it'll say things like, if it's a child aged 2 to 3 years old, it needs 1,000 to 1,400 calories depending on activity level. Or if it's like a male that's 4 to 8 years old, he needs 1,400 to 2,000 calories a day. Or if it's a female between the ages of 14 and 18 years old, she needs anywhere from 1,800 to 24 calories a day. They just give you these ballpark figures. Now, this is directly from the medical community. Those kinds of figures actually come from the Institute of Medicine, their dietary guidelines. So what happens is these are the numbers that doctors are going off of. And you are going to be hard pressed to find a conventional medicine doctor who will even mention macronutrient ratios or understand what macronutrient ratios are. It's just like, oh, your kid needs 2,000 calories. Make them eat 2,000 calories. Your kid's small, make them eat 2,000 calories. So then you get these poor moms that are like, oh my God, my kid needs 2,000 calories. And what's the best way to get a kid to eat 2,000 calories? Because I promise you, your kid's not going to eat 2,000 calories of ribeye steak, right? So the easiest way to get a kid to eat a ton of food is hyperpalatable foods, refined processed carbohydrates. And boom, the kid grows, but the kid grows horizontally instead of vertically. The next thing you know, you got a kid who's obese with chronic disease because your dummy doctor told you that your kid needs to eat 2,000 calories and he doesn't care where you get them from. So load up on the Pop-Tarts and the Cheetos, everybody, right? So what I did was I went out into the world and I created my own algorithm. And as far as I know, it's the only one that exists. I think it's still the only one that exists. And it was very difficult to create. I literally think I have the first one in the world. Now, this is within Clovis Kids. So if anybody's purchased Clovis Kids, they know what I'm talking about. But I have a macronutrient calculator for kids that will give them caloric intake, fat, protein, and net carbohydrates. So I explained this on Autumn's podcast, the Optimized Paleo podcast, that I literally had to scour PubMed and Google Scholar, and I had to look for the caloric needs of children. And I kept coming up empty, nothing besides these bullshit reference ranges. So I literally had to piece together multiple different studies using different basal metabolic rate calculations, BMR calculations. So I pieced together all the studies of BMR calculation methods. Then I compared them versus something called indirect calorimetry. So indirect calorimetry actually tracks gas exchange measurements on resting patients. You're basically in a bubble, right? So they're measuring carbon dioxide production and oxygen consumption at rest. So they'll also test this during like steady state exercise, right? So this will give you like a 24-hour caloric requirement based on what's called resting energy expenditure. You guys have heard me talk about basal metabolic rate. RMR and BMR are often just used interchangeably, even though the two tests are a little bit different, but that's super nerdy. We won't get into that, right? So I examined all of the biggest players in the game in terms of clinical data, which is like the Harris-Benedict equation, the Schofield equation, the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation, the World Health Organization equation versus indirect calorimetry. So I go through all this stuff to find all these studies to find that in adults, the Mifflin-St. Jeor seems to be the most accurate. But for kids, particularly for obese kids, which we live in a world now where 20% of kids are obese, then the World Health Organization's calculation was the most accurate when compared to indirect calorimetry, which is the most accurate, right? So then I have to dig back into my textbooks. I actually went into a book called Advanced Nutrition and Human Metabolism, fifth edition, everybody. And that was from my specialist in sports nutrition studies. And I had to find energy multipliers for these kids. But then I have to take into consideration that virtually all kids are sedentary. Like the average kid in America has 6 hours of screen time outside of television, which means they're on like an iPad or a phone or something like that. It's just staggering, right? In school, they're on screens, they're sitting down all the time. So an average kid, even if they run around for an hour or two, that's still 22 other hours that they're completely sedentary. So most kids are sedentary. So then I got to think about the energy multipliers in terms of the population. So anyway, this is how I created the Clovis Kids calculator. And as far as I know, it's the only one in the world, and it's ridiculously accurate, okay? Incredibly accurate. So the answer to the question is, how do you know if your kid's getting proper macros? You really don't, unless you have something like this algorithm that I've created. And what comes up with parents is they're like, you're telling me my kid needs so much food. Like parents are shocked by the amount of food that their kids need, because in their head, they're thinking about it as like, well, I'm an adult and I need X amount of food. Therefore, my kids who are way smaller than me need Y amount of food. And that's probably like half the amount of food that I eat. This is how most people think. They're just like this. I'm a big human. That's a little human. I'm just going to feed them less. That's all cool, right? But you have to remember, adults are done growing. So like, unless you're a bodybuilder, you're not trying to get bigger unless you're a bodybuilder, right? And how do bodybuilders get bigger? They eat a ton of food. Kids are still growing new tissues. They're growing new brain matter. Literally, it's so important. New bones, new skeletal muscle, new organs, new brain matter, new tissue everywhere. Most adults are underfed and malnourished as it is, right? I've never had an adult client come to me looking to lose fat who was like genuinely just eating too much. It's usually like a malnourished problem or a hormone imbalance, right? It's because of this ridiculous war on calories that we have. So people just do not understand what their kids need nutritionally. Again, I don't think that that's an exaggeration to say, like, if you walk down, if I went down the streets of Nashville and just asked parents, 100 parents, what are the calories that your kid needs each day and at what macronutrient ratios? 100 of those 100 parents are going to say, I have no fucking idea what you're talking about, dude. And that's crazy, because then I get in these debates where people are like, you're not a parent, you don't get it, you don't know. And I'm like, I actually know quite a bit more about what your kid needs. I'm just saying, like, I actually understand this at a very deep level. I've researched it and built a fucking calculator. Do you want to have a conversation about this? Or do you want to just tell me how I don't understand because I don't have a kiddo, right? Or do you want to let me help you help your kid? You know, it's a big deal, man. This childhood nutrition is just everything to me. You guys know that. You heard my podcast, hopefully, with Hillary, and I did an intro about Savannah and all that. So let's dig into some comments here. They eat more than you. Yes, for sure they eat more than you. Your podcast with Paul Saladino spoke so well about the misconceptions about ketosis. Yes, huge misconceptions about ketosis. I need to be in deep ketosis. Deep ketosis versus mild ketosis. It doesn't mean you're burning more fat. It just means there's more ketones present in your blood. Congratulations, right? Evie, I've just recently been told I was diabetic, but my friend has been having much success with your recommendations. Is there a way to eat that you can recommend for me? My A1C was 6.8, if that makes a difference. Yeah, 100%. I would recommend that you eat exactly like everybody else eats in here, right? So I'd like to do a custom plan with you and get you your specific caloric intake and your specific macronutrient ratios. And if you want to learn that, here, I'll make a response for you there. You can go to this website and get a plan from me and work with me one-on-one. That's definitely what I recommend. It's the best bang for your buck on anything that exists within Clovis and elsewhere, I would argue. But yeah, that's what people tend to do, is they come to me and they're like, well, I have condition XYZ. What do you recommend for me? And that's not how it works, man. It's just, you're a human. You need to start eating like a human. And Americans don't eat like humans. We eat like some other thing that is not a human, with made up processed frankenfoods that don't exist in nature, right? So if you're dealing with A1C issues, if you're dealing with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, we absolutely have to handle the carbohydrate problem. You have a carbohydrate problem, you have an insulin problem, you have a blood glucose problem. So we 100% have to handle that. We have to clean up the diet immediately. This is not a death sentence. This is not something that you can't change. I can't say things like reversing specific things. I can't say that. I'm not a doctor. I can't give you medical advice. But all I'm saying is, like, the diagnosis of diabetes does not scare me whatsoever. If I had that diagnosis, I would not be afraid of it. And I personally, again, this is not advice, if it were me, I would do the exact opposite of what the medical doctors tell me to do. But that's just me and my understanding of biochemistry and human metabolism. So it's That's kind of I can't actually give you direct advice here because you're talking about a medical condition, right? But yeah, you have to clean up your diet. You have no choice at this point. Like 100%, you got to do it. And I'm the guy to help you. I promise you. I can totally help you with this. I can change your life. You can go to a Clovis Academy. You can talk to people who are diabetics. I've worked with type 2 diabetics. I've worked with type 1 diabetics. I'll let their results just kind of speak for themselves, so I don't make any claims out of turn here. I have to be very careful with these things, right? It's really kind of crazy. But anyway, yeah, man, I would, Evie, is that how you're saying it? Evie? I'd love to help you. That'd be great. Awesome. Yeah, you can figure out your way around this pretty easily, I assure you. What else we got? When you provide healthy options for your kids, they will eat their fill of those options. Eventually, yes. It's not always easy for at first, for sure. What else we got? Judy, diagnosed at 10 with hypoglycemic and told I need to eat 6 slices of bread a day. I cried for days, and that was the beginning of me being overweight. Now I know better. Yes, that's doctor's advice. Think about it. So Evie, that's actually something interesting for you to see, like Judy's story. Judy actually has a client testimony with me, a podcast that has not been released yet, but it's a really cool story to hear because you have to understand is like when you're in the medical community, right, they're just going to say like, well, you're insulin resistant, so start injecting insulin. What? Like insulin resistant directly leads to obesity, right? Obesity and a host of other problems, which leads to chronic disease and all these things. So it's literally just like, hey, you have this condition, we're going to make it worse. Take these injections every day, you know? So again, this is not medical advice, but I'd love to help you. I'd love to work with you. It'd be awesome. What else we got? Artina. Oh, Jeff. Okay. Shared Facebook accounts. It freaks me out, man. I'm telling you, I had longstanding gut shit for years until I started your paleo diet. I'm in healthcare and I'm thankful for your insights. I will swear by your product. That's awesome, man. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. All right, let's see what we got here. We got some time left. Let me see. Yeah, okay. So this is an interesting one. The question is just, what are your thoughts on hydroponic gardening? And I don't really know which way I want to go with this because the science is on the fence technically, right? But not really. Like you could scour the internet for days on this stuff. It's like the same way of like trying to look at caloric intake for kids. Like you could scour the internet and just find like crazy mixed information. So what's happening is like farmers are up in arms about it because like the USDA, I think in 2015 or something, like decided that hydroponics can technically be called organic. And then all the farmers freaked out because there's no soil and they actually get to use permitted pesticides and they get to use permitted fertilizers and all this stuff. So the farmers like that shouldn't be able to be called USDA organic. That's nonsense. But we all know that USDA can be bought off for whatever you want to pay them, right? And people argue that one, hydroponics can't be organic. And they also argue that hydroponic produce is not as nutrient dense. But then there are all these studies. Well, I say all these studies. There are hardly any studies on nutrient density. Whatsoever, really comparing hydroponic versus soil grown produce. And the tests that have been done are kind of mixed. So like some show no difference in the nutrients that they measure. And then some show hydroponics having more of a specific nutrient and others show soil grown produce having more of specific nutrients, but they're only testing for specific nutrients. They're not testing for minerals, which are super important in the soil, right? So in my opinion, the further you get from like a holistic food ecosystem, the worse things get always, right? In The Soil Will Save Us, my AMA number 60 called The Soil Will Save Us, I talked about mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi directly penetrate the roots of plants and they actually regulate the minerals that they're giving to those plants, like the nutrients they're giving to the plants. The plants take in carbon and they feed carbon through the root system into the mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizal fungi is a web that spreads out all throughout the entire forest and all the roots of these plants, right? So these mycorrhizal fungi are feeding minerals and nutrients up into these plants. None of this happens with the hydroponic system, right? So I understand the efforts here, but to me, it feels a little bit like what people did with feedlot cattle. It's like, we're just going to make the biggest yield possible. Like, how can we just remove nature from the situation and just basically make a feedlot for vegetables, right? And there's a lot of problems when you get into that, this quantity versus quality type thing, or they think it's more sustainable, blah, 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 blah. But for me, like personally, I would choose organic soil grown produce over hydroponics 10 out of 10 times. Like I would absolutely always go with soil grown because I understand the importance of nutrient density. It's literally, we are made out of carbon, everybody. Like I understand nutrient density, okay? So without a doubt, I would always take organic soil grown produce over hydroponic produce. That said, I'm not saying hydroponics are gonna kill you. Like I get it, I get what people are trying to do, but I just can't see a scenario in which it's as nutritious as a whole food in an ecosystem in nature from like a regenerative agriculture farm or something like that. And then we actually get into the environmental piece, which you start talking about artificial lighting and all this stuff, which is a whole different ballgame, because you look at these, like they call them vertical growing operations and stuff. These are in like shipping containers. So people are buying like $85,000 shipping containers and setting them up with all these artificial lighting systems and automatic watering systems and all this crazy stuff, right? And they've actually done studies on this and shown that the carbon footprint is much, much higher than conventionally grown produce, because things like light from the sun are free and you don't have to spin an electrical meter to get them, right? Sun's free, artificial lighting is not. So again, it's like the further we get away from an actual ecosystem, the worse I think things are gonna get. And I'll be interested to see how this pans out over the current or the coming years. But I hope that I hope somebody figures out just a better way to do this, in all honesty. Because yeah, I mean, the food system is a really big problem. Food system is a big problem. Population's a big problem. There's a lot of stuff. But then again, population might not be a huge problem because everybody is using estrogenics and there's microplastics in the drinking water and glyphosate, and fertility levels are dropping again and again and again and again. Fertility levels in America are now at a new all-time low, right? Fertility rates just keep dropping and dropping and dropping because people are just not healthy. So I don't know why we don't just focus money on converting farms to regenerative farms and actually changing the environment for the better. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know what all the debate's about. I don't get all the fuss, everybody. It's just crazy. But that's my take on hydroponics. So we got a couple minutes left. This is AMA number 76. We talked about blood type. We talked about kids and macronutrients. Check out Clovis Kids. Like, you guys definitely got to check out Clovis Kids, 100%. If you're not a member of Clovis Kids, get into Clovis Kids. Clovis Kids is a one-time purchase that gets you access to the Clovis Kids calculator. And then because your kids are minors and I can't basically make plans for them, you get to run macronutrients and caloric intake for your kids using my algorithm that I created. And again, you can listen to the Optimized Paleo podcast with Autumn Smith. I was interviewed on there. And I'll put that all in the show notes here. So in all the show notes, I'll have a link to Autumn's podcast. I'll have a link to Clovis Kids, have a link to all the things you need if you want to go in and look around there. I really would love you to check out the podcast with Hillary Boynton, the Lunch Lady. Go to clovis.show/lunch lady. That's a real good one. Go to clovis.show for all the things. Check out Jackie's episode. I can't find the podcast with Paul Saladino. Anyone know where to find it? Yeah, clovis.show/Paul. Nice and easy. Clovis.show/Paul. And it is on every single major podcast platform that I'm on. So the Clovis Culture Podcast, if you just search for the Clovis Culture Podcast or search for Justin Nault, just my name, JustinNault. And Paul Saladino is interview number 11 in terms of guests. So you can go to clovis.show/Paul, or you can go to iTunes, you can go to Google Play, you can go to Spotify, you can go anywhere and find that. I wish I had a link to just click for you right here, but I don't right now. So here, I'll just type in clovis.show/Paul. Show/Paul. Go check out Paul. That was a fantastic episode. That's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. Paul is one of my favorite podcasts of all time. Hillary is one of my favorite podcasts of all time. Rob Wolf's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. Abel James was one of my favorite podcasts of all time. I love that social media episode that Abel and I did is like just spot on for what's happening right now. The social media situation, I don't know that it's getting better or worse. I'm not really sure. Things are getting crazy. But anyway, anybody have any last minute questions before we wrap this one up? And I have to eat more food for muscles, and I have to get in the infrared sauna, which is amazing. It's the best part of the night, everybody. Infrared sauna and a cold shower and super deep sleep cycles. Beauteous. It's a beautiful thing. How you guys feeling? Everybody good? Click the like button, click the happy button, click the smiley button, click the wow button. Did you learn something today? Did everybody learn something? Did you learn anything about blood type diets or hydroponics or macros for kids or calories for kids? Hit me up, everybody. Why are you so quiet? Why are you shy? We've only known each other for like 76 weeks now. Tell me something. Tell me something good. That's a great song. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw the Rocket Man movie. Oh, man. I'm going to tell you straight up. I cried through like the whole thing. It was amazing. Literally. It was like I was watching aspects of my life, except I was nowhere near as famous as Elton John. But it was like, man, it was wild. So if you haven't seen that movie, go see that movie. Had Sunday family day with my mom and my sister and my stepdad, and it was awesome. We went and saw Rocket Man. I cannot recommend it enough. Amazing movie. And particularly if you're like me and you are a giant Elton John fan and have played piano and sang for your entire life and for 17 years as a career, you should totally see that movie. And it's going to make you cry like a baby. It's awesome. Anyway, thanks for the happy faces. Thanks for the laughing faces, the love faces, the like buttons. You guys are awesome. Thank you for letting me do this every week. AMA number 76. I hope you guys liked it. Let's shut this one down because you guys are awfully quiet over there. You're making me nervous. I hope you're all right. You're just taking notes and trying to take in all the things you learned. Thank you so much. Thank you for putting up with a time change and switching it to Thursday. I'll be back next Wednesday, normal time, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, facebook.com/the Clovis Culture. We'll do a normal AMA number 77. If you guys have things you want to tell me about that you want to get answered on the podcast and the AMA, then just go to ama.iamclovis.com. Ask me some questions. This will be released tomorrow as part of the Clovis Culture podcast. We'll do it in case you missed it on Friday, which will also be sent out as a podcast. And you will also get the In Case You Missed It newsletter, which you need to sign up in case you missed it. And I'll put all this in the show notes, clovis.show. Go to clovis.show for all show notes. You guys are awesome, amazing. I love you. Thank you. AMA number 76. My name is Justin Nault. Love you. Have a good night. Bye.